It happened in less than 2 seconds. One moment, Sarah was bent over her notebook, the scratch of her pen, the only sound she could hear. And the next, a sudden heat licked the back of her head. Gasps erupted, followed by the unmistakable crackle of fire. Her frizzy hair, always the thing people teased her about, was now literally on fire. A shriek tore through the classroom desks, screeched against the tile, and the smell of burnt hair filled the air like a cruel joke from the universe. Sarah Hart, 17, stood frozen for half a heartbeat before instinct kicked in. She slapped at the flames, her palms stinging, and felt someone douse her head with water from a plastic bottle. Her vision blurred as the shock wore off, and the room came into sharp focus, every pair of eyes locked on her, most wide with mockery, not concern. She knew instantly this wasn't an accident. The heat, the suddenness, the snickers, this had fingerprints all over it. Specifically, the fingerprints of Mason and his crew, the self-proclaimed kings of Jefferson High's senior class. Mason had been gunning for her since freshman year, never missing a chance to make her hair the butt of a joke. The others laughed along, because at Jefferson High, laughing with the bullies was safer than risking becoming their next target. "Whoa, guess we can call you Sparky now." Mason's voice cut through the noise, dripping with a smirk. Sarah didn't need to see the picture. His buddies howled, and even a few kids who'd never so much as spoken to her cracked smiles. Her humiliation was like blood in the water, and the sharks were circling. Mrs. Klein, their chemistry teacher, rushed in from the supply cabinet with a damp towel, pressing it against Sarah's head. "Who did this?" she demanded, scanning the class with eyes sharp as scalpels. Silence. The kind of silence that meant everyone knew, but no one would say. Sarah didn't cry, not yet. She bit down so hard on her tongue, she could taste iron holding the tears back with sheer force. Crying would give them something to replay in their heads for weeks. Instead, she let her eyes sweep the room, meeting Mason's smug grin, for just long enough to make him look away. That was all she needed. In the nurse's office, as antiseptic stung her scalp, Sarah replayed the moment over and over. The flick of Mason's lighter earlier that week. The way his sidekick Ryan had been whispering to Caleb in the hallway just before class. She didn't know exactly what they'd used, some cheap prank chemical maybe, or just hairspray and a spark. But she knew exactly why they'd chosen her. For years, Sarah had kept her head down, endured the snickers, and laughed off the insults with fake nonchalance. But something about this, about the smell of her own hair burning, about the crowd's laughter, lodged in her chest like a splinter she couldn't ignore. As she walked home that afternoon, wind brushing the singed ends of her hair, her mind wasn't on how to avoid them next time. It was on how to make sure there wouldn't be a next time. And when the idea began to form quietly, almost shyly, it didn't feel like revenge at first. It felt like justice. She'd been underestimated for too long. And if they thought she was going to take this lying down, they were about to learn exactly what happened when you set fire to the wrong person. By Monday morning, Sarah's humiliation had metastasized into the school's favorite joke. Walking through the halls was like wading through a swamp of whispers and snickers. She smelled like barbecue, yet someone muttered as she passed the lockers near the gym, "Careful, don't stand too close, she might blow," another voice called from behind. Even the ones who didn't have the guts to say it out loud couldn't hide their smirks. Mason and his crew had the swagger of men who knew they'd pulled off something legendary. Ryan even mimed flicking a lighter when she walked by, sending Caleb into hysterics. Sarah didn't flinch. She let them think their words slid right off her. But every insult was filed away, every name remembered. She had learned long ago that in high school, anger was best kept hidden, at least until you could aim it. In chemistry class, Mrs. Klein's eyes lingered on Sarah, concern flickering across her face. But teachers couldn't fix the problem. They were like referees with no whistle, powerless to call fouls unless the players were stupid enough to get caught mid-play. And Mason wasn't stupid cruel, yes, but not stupid. It was during lunch that the seed of her plan sprouted. Sarah sat alone at the end of a table, chewing absent-mindedly on a limp salad, when she overheard Mason bragging 2 tables away. "Friday's gonna be epic," he said between bites of pizza. "Whole school in the gym, lights, music, perfect time to, put on a little show." Ryan snorted. "What, like the bonfire you started in science class?" "Better," Mason said, grinning, like he'd already won. Sarah didn't know what they had planned for the upcoming school assembly, but it didn't matter. The assembly was the perfect stage for her own counterattack. A single thought rooted itself deep in her mind. If they wanted an audience, she'd give them one, but she'd make sure it was their turn in the spotlight. That night, she pulled out a notebook, not for homework, but for strategy. Her brain clicked into the same gear she used for complex lab experiments. Every step had to be precise, every outcome predicted. She listed the tools she might need, the timing she'd have to nail, and the risks she'd have to manage. She started gathering intel. On Tuesday, she lingered near the gym doors after practice to catch a glimpse of the assembly setup. Rows of folding chairs. The projection screen lowered. Audio equipment tucked behind the stage curtain. She noted everything. On Wednesday, she accidentally dropped her pen near Mason's table and caught sight of the duffel bag he carried, probably holding whatever prank gear he planned to unleash. By Thursday, she had what she needed. She discovered that Mason's crew would be backstage before the assembly to help the tech team. The same tech team who Sarah knew left the control panel for the big screen, unattended during lunch. She didn't want to just embarrass them. She wanted to flip the humiliation so violently that Mason and his friends wouldn't be able to walk down the hall without feeling their ears burn. The final piece clicked into place when she remembered a certain folder buried on the school network. During a digital photography class last semester, Mason had posed for some funny pictures. Him in a frilly apron, holding a spatula like a sword, with Ryan making duck lips in the background. The images weren't scandalous, but they were ridiculous. And Sarah had quietly saved a copy to her personal drive. As she zipped her backpack shut that night, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her singed hair was pulled into a tight braid, her expression cool. She felt no guilt, just a steady calm. They wanted to play with fire. She was going to burn their reputations to the ground, metaphorically this time. Friday morning came, wrapped in a chill that hinted at early winter. But inside Jefferson High, the air was charged with the restless buzz of Assembly Day. The halls were littered with posters about school spirit, though most students saw it as an excuse to skip class and watch whatever chaos the seniors stirred up. Sarah arrived earlier than usual. The braid in her hair wound so tightly it felt like armor. She slipped into the computer lab during first period, claiming she needed to print an assignment. Instead, she plugged in a small flash drive and navigated to the network's media folder. In under 30 seconds, the Spirit Week presentation file for the assembly now had an extra slide hidden in its sequence, one that would hit Mason like a sucker punch. Her timing had to be perfect. The plan wasn't just to embarrass him. It was to let the moment stretch, to give the audience time to fully absorb what they were seeing before Mason could kill it. And for that, she needed control of the big screen's cues. Second period, she passed by the gym under the guise of delivering a note to Coach Daniels. She peeked in, rows of chairs lined up the tech booth at the back with its tangled mess of cables and switches. The control laptop sat open, logged in its screensaver, bouncing lazily. She caught sight of the stage curtain swaying slightly. Mason and Ryan's laughter leaked through. She already knew what they were planning thanks to a stolen glance in Mason's duffel bag the day before. The canisters of stage smoke were harmless enough, but the red dye packets they planned to toss into the vents, those would have coated the front row, including the principal, in blotchy crimson. That was their big joke. Sarah felt no pang of morality stopping it. If anything, her chest tightened with satisfaction at the thought of beating them to their own punchline. During lunch, she made her move. The gym was locked for assembly prep, but she knew the side door near the equipment room had a faulty latch. She slipped in unnoticed, her footsteps muffled by the rubber mats. At the tech booth, she quickly cued her hidden slide so it would trigger right after the principal's opening remarks. The image, a perfectly timed freeze frame from last year, showed Mason mid-blink, mouth open, in a goofy half-yell, wearing that ridiculous pink apron with "Kiss the Cook" in glitter letters. Ryan was behind him, duck-lipped and cross-eyed, holding a rubber chicken. To make sure the humiliation stuck, she added one more detail, bold white text across the top that read, "Senior Leaders of Jefferson High." By the time she left the booth, her hands weren't shaking. They were steady, her breathing even. This was what power felt like. As students started filing into the gym for the assembly, Mason strutted in with his crew, their duffel bags slung carelessly over Ryan's shoulder. They were already laughing, jostling each other, like they'd just pulled off the perfect prank. Sarah took a seat 3 rows back, dead center, where she'd have the best view of their faces when the moment landed. The principal took the stage, tapping the mic. "All right, everyone, let's settle down." The murmurs quieted. The slideshow began. The first few slides, harmless shots of pep rallies and football games. Mason lounged in his seat, glancing at Sarah once with a smug little smirk. And then her slide appeared. The gym erupted. Laughter shot like cannon fire from every corner. Some students doubled over. Others clapped, phones whipped out to snap photos before the image could vanish. Mason froze, his smirk collapsing into a flat, horrified stare. Ryan's face went beet red. Sarah sat still, her lips pressed into the faintest curve of a smile. She didn't need to laugh. The room was doing it for her. For a heartbeat, the sound of the crowd was almost too loud to process laughter. Cheers, the metallic squeak of folding chairs as people twisted to point. Mason's swagger evaporated, his face locking into a mask of stunned rage. Ryan tried to laugh it off, throwing up his hands like it was all part of the joke. But the bright crimson creeping up his neck told the truth. The principal blinked at the screen, clearly confused by the sudden tonal shift. Well, that's spirited. He gestured awkwardly toward the tech booth. "Let's move on." But the next slide didn't come. Sarah had timed it perfectly. Her flash drive's little program was holding the image in place for an extra 20 seconds, an eternity, when you're on the receiving end of an entire gym's ridicule. Every second deepened the humiliation, cementing it into the school's collective memory. Mason half rose from his seat, eyes locked on the booth, but the crowd's laughter pinned him there. Someone in the back yelled, "Nice apron." "Chef Mason," another shouted. "Kiss the cook." It rippled through the gym like wildfire, voices blending into a chant. "Kiss the cook. Kiss the cook." Sarah didn't chant. She didn't need to. Her satisfaction came from watching the power drain out of him, from knowing this was how it felt when the whole school turned on you. Finally, the image vanished, replaced by a slide of a last month's pep rally. The principal stumbled forward with the program, but the energy in the room had shifted. Mason slumped into his chair, trying to disappear, while Ryan stared fixedly at the floor. But Sarah wasn't done. She had slipped one more surprise into the queue. When it was time for senior spotlights, the big screen flashed to a photo montage of students volunteering, winning awards, scoring touchdowns. And then, boom, the next image. A short looping video of Mason and Ryan from the same apron photo day, mock sword fighting with spatulas and nearly knocking over a pot of boiling pasta. The clip played twice, before the booth attendant scrambled to cut it off, but it was enough. The crowd howled, and even the teachers who tried to keep a straight face were biting their lips to hide smiles. From her seat, Sarah caught Mason's eyes. For a split second, she saw him register "You did this." His jaw tightened, his fists clenched on his knees. But he didn't move, not with the entire senior class watching. When the assembly ended, Mason's crew shoved through the crowd, like they were trying to outrun the echo of the laughter. Sarah stayed seated, letting the room empty around her. She knew they'd come for her eventually, that Mason's pride couldn't take a hit like this without retaliation. But for now, she had the luxury of silence and the satisfaction of knowing she'd struck first. In the hallway, afterward, snippets of conversation floated by. "Did you see Mason's face? That apron? Oh my God, Sarah was just sitting there like nothing happened, exactly how she wanted it." As she reached her locker, she spotted Mason leaning against the far wall, arms crossed. Ryan flanked him, still scowling. Their eyes followed her, but they didn't say a word. Not here. Not yet. Sarah shut her locker with a calm click, met Mason's stare, and walked away. She could feel the shift, how the air around her was no longer tinged with mockery, but with a new kind of attention. Some kids smiled at her now. Others just looked at her differently. Her scalp still bore the faint scent of burnt hair, a reminder of where this all started. But in that moment, it didn't smell like shame anymore. It smelled like victory. The storm hit before the final bell. Sarah was halfway through her last class when the announcement came over the intercom. "Sarah Hart, please report to the principal's office." The words rolled through the room like a chill draft. A few students exchanged looks, half expecting to see her wilt under the weight of it. But Sarah just gathered her books and stood her movements, slow, deliberate. Principal Dover sat behind his desk, arms folded, with Mrs. Klein perched in the corner like an uneasy witness. Mason was there too, slouched in the opposite chair, his face still tight with humiliation. Ryan lingered by the door hands in his hoodie pocket, avoiding eye contact. Sarah Dover began his voice somewhere between stern and curious. "Mason tells me you inserted inappropriate material into today's assembly." Sarah didn't bother denying it. "I corrected the program." Dover's eyebrows rose. Corrected. She kept her gaze steady. "They were planning to throw red dye at the front row, including you. I stopped it." That landed. Dover glanced at Mason, whose ears went pink. "We were just messing around," Mason muttered. But it was weak defensive. Mrs. Klein cleared her throat. "I saw the canisters myself, Mr. Dover. She's telling the truth." The principal leaned back, weighing the situation. Sarah could see the calculation in his eyes. Punish her for the public embarrassment, or acknowledge that she had, in her own way, prevented something worse. Finally, he sighed. "Both of you will serve detention. Mason for planning the dye stunt. Sarah for hijacking school property." It wasn't the clean victory she'd imagined, but she'd take it. Detention was nothing compared to the look on Mason's face when he realized half the school had screenshots of him in that apron. Over the next week, the dynamic shifted. Mason's crew still muttered insults when she passed, but their words lacked the bite they once had. Every time they tried to stir up a laugh at her expense, someone would inevitably whisper, "Kiss the cook," and the joke turned back on them. The sting of her hair-burning incident began to fade, replaced by the legend of what she'd done at the assembly. By Friday, even people she'd never spoken to were giving her nods in the hallway. In the lunchroom, her usual table at the end wasn't so empty anymore. 2 juniors from art class sat with her chatting about a mural project. The attention wasn't exactly friendship, but it wasn't pity either. It was respect. Mason avoided her eyes now. When he did look her way, it wasn't with mockery, but with the wary acknowledgement predators reserve for prey that turns out to have teeth. On her walk home that afternoon, Sarah felt the November air cut through her jacket, the braid against her back swaying like a quiet banner. She thought about the smell of burning hair, the laughter in the gym, the way Mason's face had drained of color. The satisfaction was real, but so was the knowledge that it could all happen again to someone else. Justice wasn't a one-time act. It was a posture, a readiness. She knew she couldn't fight every battle at Jefferson High, but she also knew this: she would never go back to being the girl who kept her head down and hoped to be ignored. They had lit a fire in her that day. The difference now was she knew how to aim it. Revenge may feel sweet, but Sarah's story wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming her voice. In a world where silence often enables cruelty, she learned that the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play the role others write for you. Her retaliation was calculated, not reckless, and it reminded everyone that humiliation cuts both ways. The lesson is simple: stand your ground, but do it with precision and purpose. Because sometimes the best way to fight fire is to make sure it burns in the right direction.